Welcome to Gun Owners of America's State of the Second podcast. I'm your host, Kailey.
And John, and thank you again for joining us today. Today we have Adam from Century Arms. Adam, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Century Arms?
Yeah, so I am the Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at Century Arms and Canik USA. Obviously, we are one of the foremost leaders in imported as well as domestically manufactured AKs. And then on the Canik side, obviously been bringing in some fantastic pistols, superior as we like to call them, since 2012, developing into what is now a U.S. manufactured facility that's about to open in West Palm Beach, Florida. Excited to be here, excited to support GOA and talk about just kind of what's going on in our industry, what's going on in the state of America today, and maybe throw in a couple stingers about Century Arms and Canik along the way.
First and foremost, I appreciate you coming. Canik has come a long way. You guys are coming out with a ton of new stuff. Everything that's coming out from Canik is just gold. So on the policy side, let's kind of talk about what it looks like for you as an importer, because you're importing a lot of this stuff in. What is the biggest impact on you guys as an importer?
Hey man, you were just ripping the Band-Aid off right out the gate. I'm just diving into it. I guess this is going to be a 6-minute long podcast, and I've got 4 minutes to answer all these questions. No, so both on the Century and the Canik side, obviously, there is a lot to think about when it comes to importation. Not just from, what are we going to bring in, how will we bring it in versus a pistol versus a rifle configuration, because once you start talking rifle, now you're talking 922R compliance. For those of you that aren't aware, basically what that means is there's certain guidelines and factors that must be checked off in order to be compliant with U.S. regulations. So, for instance, on a rifle, there's certain lengths of the rifle, there's certain weights, there's certain dimensions, ways you can bring it in. But then once it's here, there has to be a certain number of components on said rifle that are now U.S. manufactured. So a lot of companies will do things like stocks and mags and trigger groups and all kinds of things. And I believe it's 7 right now that you have to have components on the gun in order to make it 922R compliant. Pistols, a little different. But with pistols, now you're looking at things like weight and dimensions and calibers and functionality. There's a lot of things that come in with that you have to check off these boxes. So great example is the Canik Mete MC9, which is our micro compact pistol, just won Carry Pistol of the Year with the Industry Choice Awards. Everybody's like, when are you coming out with one? Obviously there's some really great ones in the market, the P365, the Springfield Hellcat. We actually had this gun done 2 years ago. Well, done, quote unquote done, but the compliance side and the importation side was just a monster. So instead of just sitting on our laurels and just fighting with lawyers to get it done, we actually continued to develop the gun. But when you do that, if you make major changes, now you've got to resubmit it to the ATF for a temporary import, for, permitting. Then you've got to start the process all over. So it was truly kind of a roller coaster of emotion and a roller coaster of manufacturing process to kind of get it done, but stay in the guidelines so that we could actually bring this gun to market in some sort of formidable time. So it is a lot. What it does is it doesn't just set up the red tape, the government compliance side, but it also kind of changes how you have to develop something, because ultimately it's all about fitting into the box, but fitting into the box in the most creative way you can.
Well, and the big thing that I know, at least from my little knowledge on importing handguns, it's a point system.
Yeah,
so it's a
absolutely.
certain points, and you have to hit, 90, or it's some sort of number of points,
right,
so you can import. And being on this side of the table and going, how many times do you guys get a call like, hey, I saw this handgun in some magazine in Europe. When are you guys going to bring it in? Why is it not here? And there's a lot of red tape that people don't understand on bringing in just a handgun.
No, that's such a good example. For instance, and I'm kind of jumping around, but we have a really interesting dynamic because we see it from Century side and from Canik. Right now overseas, what we're dealing with like braces and, even like the MCK, the Micronis and all those kind of things in Europe, that's not a thing. There's no such thing as an SBR over there. A gun is a gun, a rifle is a rifle. You can walk into a gun store, grab a suppressor, and walk out. Like, that's how it works over there. Those are because, as ironic as people think, Europe is so anti-gun, certain things are just common sense, and that's kind of what we need to go back to. Everybody tries to use common sense gun law as a term over here. Why don't we just use common sense and say a suppressor, all it does is make it so it's not as loud. A SBR doesn't do anything, a short-barreled rifle doesn't do anything different than a longer-barrel rifle. If anything, it's deterrent of it. So when people see these guns, it's because Europe, in that sense, is using more common sense in terms of what is actually affecting the gun. This gun is not any more dangerous because it has a 3-inch barrel versus a 5-inch barrel. But on a compliance side in the United States, in order to get those points, it's got to be like a 3.1-inch barrel. I mean, there's like you said, the point system. And just these micro nuances of difference can literally be the difference between the gun being allowed to come to the United States and not. And so, yeah, it's very, very tough to make that work. And that's kind of one of the big reasons that Canik has said, we need to take things into our own hands and create our own destiny in building this facility in the United States, not only to kind of be able to manufacture stuff in the U.S. and not have to go through some of these hoops that you have to, but also to now go after government contracts because you have to have a U.S. facility, and also to control your own destiny if it were to ever come to pass that importation of firearms was no longer allowed, which, God forbid it ever comes to that, but that's why people like you at the GOA are so important, is because we have to continue to battle for our rights, because if it was up to certain, people in power at the time, I don't think they'd allow that. I think that's something that we have to be really, really conscious of, that an executive decision could literally ban the importation of firearms overnight.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. And GOA has been traditionally very active in kind of all aspects. We have lobbyists that are in Washington, D.C. We have a very active grassroots. We have legal cases. We have state directors and regional directors. So at any level where tyranny is happening, we can combat it. But with the NFA and all of these gun laws that are on the books and that are attempted every year, it really puts a damper on the industry. But beyond the industry, it inhibits citizens from being able to exercise their Second Amendment right.
Right.
And so people call us crazy when we work to get legislation introduced like the Shall Not Be Infringed Act. Because they're like, oh, it'll never pass. It'll never pass. Well, one, never say never in American politics, period. But two, it's getting people on the record supporting your Second Amendment rights. Because if we don't do anything offensively, if we don't change the conversation, if we don't introduce the legislation, then we are giving up ground. And so it's so important that we have people on record introducing these legislation and work with our members to show them that it's popular. And it kind of goes back to GOA's definition of a gun rights activist. And it's someone who takes personal responsibility, not only in the use of their firearms, but in the defense of their right to own them. That is what GOA is about, period. And I think it has a massive impact on companies like yours.
Well, yeah, it's what we were talking about at dinner last night. It's the silent majority finally having the gall to say, enough's enough. We were joking about the song that just came on there. What is the Richmond, north of Richmond?
Yeah.
There's an evident reason that song billboarded or started on the charts at number one. First time it's ever happened, a non-signed guy is the number one song in the country right out the gate. And I think that's what it is people are tired of seeing people that don't actually represent the opinions of their constituents going out there and making decisions for them. And like you said, so when GOA says, hey, this might not have the weight to pull all the way through, we're going to hold people accountable. We're going to make your representative declare on this issue. He's going to have to make a decision. He's going to have to, get off the pot, essentially. Like, here, you're going to have to say something so we know where you stand when you're standing in front of all your peers in terms of congressmen and senators. And then also when you're standing in front of all your constituents later, you have to answer for how you voted on this. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I think it's important, a level of accountability, regardless of how far you think it's going to go, to continuously bringing up these factors and these decisions that are important ultimately to the silent majority. Even people that don't maybe have quite the passion that the three of us in this room have about firearms, you know, they still, I think a lot of them still, I know a lot of them still believe in the power of the Second Amendment. And maybe they don't necessarily have a large, I was about to say a number of guns, but, you know, what are you, the ATF? Relax. And the boating accident was terrible. I lost most of them.
Awful.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people understand that without the Second Amendment, you're losing the First Amendment, which is such a cliche saying. We say it all the time, but it's such a powerful thing. And I think what GOA does is protect the First Amendment too, by doing that, by enacting that in front of Congress, enacting that in front of Senate, and on your local legislation as well. I think it literally holds people accountable and lets them know that we're not going away. So to that, I cheers you.
It's all thanks to our members, which are incredibly active, and I think that's what makes, you know, GOA is we've never lost sight of the fact that we are a grassroots army first and foremost. And I think it's pretty awesome. I mean, I'm proud of the organization I work at. I
couldn't tell. Yeah.
I chose them for a reason. I hope everyone chooses where they work for a reason. But you know, we're founded in 1976. Like we're not the new kids on the block.
This isn't your first rodeo, right?
Yeah. And in all of that time, we've never compromised on the Second Amendment. And you can't compromise on the Second Amendment because ultimately your rights are constitutionally protected, not government granted. And it's so important that we remind people of that they understand that they have a Second Amendment right, and it's their choice whether they exercise it or not. But it's their right. And so I just think it's really, really important to kind of remind people of that when you give up something, yeah, you might not care about it now, or you may even disagree with it, but that's yours that you're giving up.
Right.
Well, you said it best. You know, people with a stroke of a pen can get rid of stuff. And we saw that, 2 years ago, a year ago, with the Russian ammo ban. I mean, that impacted you guys probably more than anybody else. And then also on the Russian gun ban, too. You know, those two strokes of pens just impacted the industry bigger than what most people think.
Yeah, and I can speak on that if you'd like me to.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, we never held it behind closed doors, that Red Army standard, which is one of our brands, you know, and it's our ammo manufacturer or ammo brand. A lot of that ammo was imported from Russia. I mean, it was even kind of held in the packaging design. There was the hammer and sickle on the star and all. And when all this started, before even really a lot of the information came out, and you know, we're not going to dive. This isn't a political podcast. We're not going to dive into who's done right and who's done wrong. But what we did recognize is that a lot of people were losing their lives that didn't need to, and it was ridiculous. So we made a decision as a company that we were going to cut ties even before, you know, it was official that we had to, but we were going to kind of move in a different direction or start looking for other options in terms of what we could do with our ammo sourcing. And then we were also going to kind of rebrand the packaging a little bit. So we thought the Red Army standard brand, you know, a name is only as powerful as you give it. So we were like, this isn't giving homage to Russia, but it is our brand that we've worked very hard, and a lot of people's livelihoods are attached to this brand. But what we are going to do is we remove the hammer and sickle from the star. And if you see any new packaging out there, you'll notice that. There may be some still circulating out there, and if so, buy it, because 7.62 by 39, which I'll get to in a second, is getting very hard to get. But we said, all right, we're going to move away from that. But the reality with Russia and ammo, especially on like the com block styles, that, you know, 7.62 by 54R, 545, 7.62 by 39, is people don't realize like 80% of that ammo came out of Russia. So all of a sudden, 7.62 by 39, the cheap, fun AK ammo that everybody, you know, it was 17 cents a round to go plink, you know, started creeping, and now it's 40 plus cents a round. So, you know, there's a lot of companies right now, some really good ammo manufacturers in the U.S., so from the big ones down to some smaller startups that are looking to kind of invest in 7.62 by 39. But an ammo line is not an easy thing to do. So that, like you said, that the swipe of that pin drastically affected what is significant calibers, and then obviously a whole gambit of firearms in this country, the viability of it, and that's not going away anytime soon. So, people that were very much AK lovers and things like that are now, can they afford to, even if they can find the ammo? So yeah, I mean, one swipe of a pen you might not see it that day, but very quickly you're going to see the ripple effect of it that turns into a wave.
This episode of State of the Second is brought to you by Fort Scott Munitions. Their patented tumble upon impact technology makes them a leader in the ammunition world. Visit them at fortscottmunitions.com.
What people don't understand, a lot of people trash steel ammo because it's cheap and it's dirty and this. What people don't understand is the price of steel ammo also helps keep the price of brass ammo down.
It holds it in check, because if it goes too high, if all of a sudden brass is crazy high, people start buying steel. And then they're like, well, crap, we still got to sell the brass. So now, that's a great analogy. Look at you saying something smart. Our little buddy's growing up so fast.
Look at that. No, because I saw it on the ammo side when I was working in ammo. It was, once that steel started to dry up, you see the price. And again, the price of steel went up because we were in unspoken times where the market was just hot. But the price of steel went up. Now that there's nothing to keep the price of brass in check, and we're seeing now that the consumer is controlling that price, the price is starting to drop drastically compared to last year and the year previously. But without having that, the threshold to get into, and we'll go off a 9mm, for example, you could get a box of steel case 9mm for $6-7 a box, and you get into shooting pretty cheaply. And brass was still at like $12-13 a box.
Right.
Now there's nothing to keep that in check. So now we're seeing the price of brass went rocketing, and now we're seeing it slightly come down. But without having these checks and balances in the industry with the cheaper stuff, we're now creating a threshold where people have to pay more. We're, all these new shooters coming in, the ammo is just more and more expensive, and that is a consumable product that you cannot replace pretty quickly.
I think it's important too. We are calling it cheap, and in a sense, it is cheap in comparison to the definition, not only in terms of what it costs, but then also sometimes the production. But steel case ammo, as long as it's a reliable company, is not bad.
No,
it's really not. And ultimately, I am of the belief that what you go to the range with, and if you're practicing just, hey, I just want to shoot for fun. I want to take people out there. I want to go have a little shooting competition with my friends, or I ultimately want to put 1,000 rounds down range today and just enjoy myself. There's nothing wrong with shooting steel-cased ammo, other than you just know you're going to have to clean your gun a little more thorough that night because it's going to be gooky. But there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if I'm training, I'm going to train with something that's going to be as similar to what I'd actually have to use in a situation where I would need it, just so that repeatability is there and that familiarity. And ultimately what I'm going to have in my firearms that are going to be at the house that I'm going to depend on in a one-shot opportunity. I get one chance to defend myself, one chance to know that my firearm functions properly, one chance to know that the ammo is dependent and is going to do what it needs to do. That's going to be a different conversation. But just to go out there and have a great time with ammo, steel case is probably what I'm going to pick 90% of the time, because half the people I'm bringing out there, they don't even know the difference, and they're not going to know the difference. And 80% of the time, I don't know the difference. So I'm just going to shoot it and have a good time and save some money.
Well, we were talking about it last night. You bring out something and you're like, oh, I want these people to have fun. But in your head, you're like, well, that was 10 cents. That
$1,
was
$2, $3. Yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of going back to what we were talking about of legislation being introduced, I think this pricing people out of the market we're seeing every year when the 1,000% excise tax gets introduced.
Right.
That would cripple most people from being able to get that first firearm, or for people to be able to expand and have the gun that they want to use in a self-defense situation, or just to own in general. And so I think that it's part of a bigger picture than even just the increase in ammo prices.
The 1,000% tax, that is the most ridiculous thing. The gall of somebody to be able to hey, this is what we're going to do. So we are talking about inflation being at an all-time high. We're talking about eggs being $6 a 12 versus $1 at 32. You know, gas being at $4 something a gallon in good parts of the country. You know. And then you're going to say, hey, we know it's tough. You know, we got to band together. The White House releases things like, here's how to spend smart, things like this. And then you're going to put 1,000% tax on something that is protected by the Second Amendment of our country. Like, it just shows the disconnect between where some of our politicians are now and where our country was rooted. It's just, it is absolutely mind-boggling to me. And I feel like I'm a walking billboard for you guys right now, but that's why organizations like the GOA are so important, because there's no common sense there. Like, it just doesn't make sense. You're sitting here talking about how the government's supposed to be doing more for their people and fighting the whole persona that the government only wants to tax people and only wants to take. And then you propose in public forum 1,000% tax on something that is protected by our Constitution.
They know what they're doing, right? They know what they're doing. They're pricing people out of the market, because the new gun ownership that's happened over the last year, 2, 3 years has been remarkable. And so, you know, they're in a position right now where I think they're trying to get as much done. And they're like, well, you know, they won't pass 1,000% tax, but if we start the conversation here, maybe we can get
a 200% tax or something.
And so that's why GOA is no compromise, because we understand that the Second Amendment gives us a position of strength. And every time we allow legislation to water that down, we are just giving up ground. And they're gaining everything.
Goes back to the slippery slope mentality. You know,
Exactly.
that term gets used a lot in our industry, but the slippery slope mentality really is, you know, I 100% agree with you guys. I think there is no room for backing down from what our forefathers intended when they founded this country and kind of set into place what are our constitutional rights. With that being said, I also think it's very good to have conversation. I think dialogue is important. You know, you and I would go on a podcast right now that was with, and I have done some conversations with, like, Mothers Demand Action and things like that. I don't mind sitting across the table and as long as we can have a conversation that is actually educational. But unfortunately, what happens a lot of times is it becomes a domineering, one-sided speech rather than a conversation. You know, let's actually talk about the stats that you have, and let me as another American, let me have compassion for that. But then let me also talk to you about the stats that I know that are fact, and you're welcome to fact check them. And let's maybe say, wow, you know, what can we do more as a society to ensure that, which I think all of us agree on, the right people have firearms in their hands. And that's not like everybody deserves, in my opinion, I think everybody at this table, we all deserve to own a gun until we don't anymore, until we do something that is that inalienable line in the sand that says you have lost your right to vote. You've lost your right to own a gun. And we know what these things, these are felons of intense degree and things like this that, at least in my opinion, I look at that and go, yeah, you know what? You're not welcome in my house, so I probably don't want you welcome on the range with me either. But until that, you know, until we can have those kind of conversations, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. And unfortunately, as you've seen, like, it's just, it's such a level of just almost insanity. Like you said, with 1,000% tax and things like this. Yes, they know what they're doing and they're posturing this way so that they can get it. And it doesn't seem like as bad when they get 100% tax. But ultimately, it's just insanity. It just really is.
Yeah, I mean, murder is still illegal.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you use to commit it. I mean, it's just that's reality.
Yeah.
And so no, I definitely agree. But you're right. I mean, if they're constantly walking that down and saying, you know, hey, if we start at 1,000, maybe we can get 10 this year and 20% next year.
But we're also guilty. I mean, we hear it, and then we're angry, and then we got other things we got to worry about. And you know, and that's what the reality is they want to just beat you down so much that suddenly it doesn't seem so, you're just tired of talking about it, you know? And that's why it's important to have organizations that are just focused solely on one thing, to keep reminding you the severity of what they're trying to do. So again, bravo.
Yeah, I think that it kind of, the barrier to entry to get politically involved sometimes seems higher than it is, and they want it to.
Right.
You know, the reality is someone can go on our website right now.
It's like $25, right?
Well, yeah, $25 to be a member, but even if you want to just email your representative on a gun bill, it takes about 45 seconds to fill out the form, and then you have made your voice known. But they don't want you to know that because then they have to deal with your email. They have to, do tally marks, and they're like, "Oh crap, people in my district really don't want
paying attention."
this."
Yeah.
And but it's a lot easier than it used to be. When GOA first started, it was like you would mail in a letter to Congress and like you'd sign your name, and like that was how you took action. Email, I mean, we're kind of very luxury now.
Yeah, we streamlined the process. Yeah.
Like, give me like less than 1 minute, and you can take action on something. And sometimes people still feel like, wow, that's a lot of time.
Well, I also think, it's a lot of time. When we are, I call it the goldfish mentality now. We don't, the power of things like, and definitely the generation behind me, but the power of TikTok and all this stuff has just really taken people's attention to anything longer than 10 seconds and made it seem so exhausting. But I think more than just the fact that it is, time consuming, as you want to call it, which isn't, but that's how they feel. I just don't have time to do that. It's like, I used to be, when I was in marketing outside of the firearms industry, you remember like, they would have the boxes at the front of a restaurant. You could drop your business card in it, and it was somebody's going to win a cruise. And I would never do it. And we would do these at our places, and we'd have it there for a month, and there'd be 6 people in a month that put their card in there or filled out it. And the reason is the same reason I never did it, because I would say, oh, I never win something like that. I never win something like that. Or this can't be, it's too good to be true, or this can't be real, or it's got to be a scam. And the reality is it wasn't. But we all felt that way, or we felt we didn't have the luck, or we didn't have the voice to be heard, so we just didn't even bother. And I think that's where a lot of people feel. They feel like, even if I write this email, nobody's going to read it, or it's going to fall on deaf ears. But I think what's so powerful about what you guys do is there is power in numbers.
Yeah.
And when you have a conglomerate of like-minded people speaking on the same subject and agreeing that this is the direction they want their representatives to go, you have no choice but to at least listen. They have to listen, or you know what? They're not going to have that job much longer. And I think that's what it is you have to speak up, because we've seen people that we completely staunchly disagree with, that 90% of this country disagree with, is getting stuff done because their little 5% of constituents are speaking so loudly that it seems to be so much bigger than it actually is. And people are like, well, we got to do something. We got to do something because everybody wants this. But the reality is only 5%, if even, want that. But because they're the only ones talking, and they're talking so damn loudly, that we're getting stuff done. So imagine if 95% of people said, just all in accord, no. And they just said it. They didn't scream it. They didn't tear buildings down. They just said no. And they said it together, and they said it in a normal, calm voice, how loud and deafening that would be. And I think that's where we have to get as a country.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking, Kailey and I were talking at one point, and you brought up that goldfish mentality. It's all about dopamine hits now. Everybody wants a quick dopamine hit, and that's why they're scrolling. If we got to find a way to turn talking to your congressman into a dopamine hit and going, oh, I'm excited because this has made me, it hits different. And
hitting a target at 500 yards, that's a dopamine hit for me.
Yeah.
Dumping a mag, that's a dopamine hit for me. So, yeah, but like you're saying, I think that's when you actually see the needle move.
Yeah.
But you're not going to see the needle move unless we actually try. And that's where I think I'm guilty of it. Like you said, the 45-second thing, that's why I got all defensive on it, because you're right, though. I mean, it is. And I think we are. Maybe not with the GOA, or maybe not with politically focused firearms legislation for like people like the GOA, but anything, whether it be we complain about the service at a restaurant, and they say, at the end you get to take this survey in 45 seconds. But we're like, oh, that's stupid. I'm not doing that. I don't have time for that. But maybe if you did, maybe the next time you went into that restaurant, it wouldn't be so crappy, And it's just a reality. We all feel like we don't have enough time to give our feedback, but then we complain when nothing changes.
No, you're 100% right on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key is understanding how powerful a movement can be. So, we've been fighting the lead ammo ban on public land. This is not a new fight. It's been years and years and years. But the comment period just closed. And it was something like 90% or over 90% came from GOA members.
Wow.
That's because we do have an active base, but our base is only so strong, and that's why it's so critical that more people join. It's so critical that more people get involved, and that you kind of take a moment and look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, well, is this an issue that's going to affect me? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Is this something that's going to affect what I want to see overall happen? And maybe you go and you spend your 45 seconds, and then now all of a sudden you've joined. And then when the comment period closes, you sit back and go, wow, we made a difference here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that that's so important, is that we give recognition where recognition is due. And that's a huge victory, whether it ends up, we're in a tough situation with the executive branch, so who knows if they'll take our comments seriously. But it's very clear where the people who responded, who were the squeaky wheel, stand. And I think that all of our members can be very proud of that fact.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, if you don't do something, do you really have a right to complain? You know?
Well, I in this room probably one of the most affected people about it, because in Arizona we don't have a lot of public ranges, or it is, you go out to the desert, you find a spot. It's all government-owned land, BLM land.
Sounds like a giant public range to me, boy.
Well, that's what it is. And recently, one of the spots that we normally go to has been shut down because of the concern of lead. And it's some old law in Arizona, because it's technically a cow watering hole, which it's not. There's no water.
There's no cows. There's no water.
There's no water. But they put up the sign that we're no longer allowed to shoot there. And I'm like, well, the next spot's 45 minutes the other direction, or I got to drive another 20 minutes into the desert to go to another secluded spot, which is a safe place to shoot. And it gets annoying. And now, I'm putting in going, hey, let's, why did we change? Why can't we change this? This needs to be, why did you change this in the first place? Let's change it back to an enjoyable recreation spot for everybody.
Because the reality is, the people that are actually taking the time to go out there and shoot, like you said, I think one of the key things you said there was a safe space to shoot. And we're not talking about a safe space like a emotional, pillow room. We're talking about a safe space. We recognize this as, hey, I can shoot responsibly. I understand the four guidelines of shooting responsibly. I've assessed the situation, and it's a great place that I can do this, that I can take others and train them in the proper way to do things, and without risking myself or anybody else. You are the kind of person that technically they want shooting, and they're making it harder and harder for you. The person that doesn't respect these guidelines and these boundaries is just going to go do whatever they want, whether it be in the middle of a town, a city block or whatever. Like that. You're the one that's actually trying to do it the right way, as our forefathers intended, and they're making it more difficult for you. But like you said, murder is still illegal, and the things that are still illegal, the people that are owning guns illegally, that are the small minority that are making it seem so sensational, aren't going to abide by these lines. They don't care about lead laws. You know where else lead is illegal? In another person that didn't do anything wrong, but they're doing less about protecting that and more about protecting the non-existent cows and water out in the desert. So yeah, it's frustrating. But I understand, like, it sounds so simple. And like, they use these things like lead and our fear of lead. And yes, we understand what you're saying. But if you actually look at the percentage of what lead from shooting does to the environment, is so minuscule in comparison to what corporations are dumping in the water and in the desert every single day. But it seems that the focus obviously is on the Second Amendment versus actually protecting the environment.
Yeah. So changing topics a little bit.
Yeah, we could go down that. It was a 9.5 hour podcast. Yeah.
So let's talk about first-time gun ownership. the increases that we're seeing there, how's that affecting business, and how are you guys going after that market and educating people?
So especially on the Canik side, that has been where we've seen the biggest influence. I think we were talking last night, the numbers that are actually finally coming out of new gun owners over the last couple of years is staggering. It's like 9 million. It was crazy. And like you were saying, that's what actually has these politicians, the more they talk about it, the more they try to regulate it, people are like, you know what? Suddenly I'm off the fence in terms, and I'm actually going to get this. Americans don't like being told what they can't have, And for Canik, what we did is we created a firearm that's reliable, that has built a fan base, and not only a fan base, but ambassadors of our brand can put the confidence in referring that to somebody else. I think everybody over the last couple of years that's been in the firearms world, whether it's working in it or just been, the neighborhood guy for it for years, started getting crazy amounts of phone calls when everything started hitting the fan about 3.5 years ago. Hey, can I get a gun? Hey, what gun should I get? Hey, do you have any ammo I could buy? All these kind of questions started coming up from people that at the barbecue 6 months before that were looking at you like you were the crazy person because you owned a gun. Not because you were carrying a gun, just you owned a gun. And now all of a sudden they're asking. So what we found is that with Canik building products that were reliable, that came with all the products you need to not only take that gun home that day, but then utilize it from, our guns come with holsters, they come with extra mags, they come with back straps that 3 different sizes so that you can, really customize the fit in your hand to what's appropriate from you, small, medium, and large. They're ambidextrous, they're co-witness, they, all the things that really are I like this, but I wish it had this. We've allowed it to be customizable. So we were able to do all that and then do it at a price that we kind of consider our wow factor. It's people, wow, I get all this for what? And that has been really what we attribute a lot of our growth to with all these new gun owners in the U.S. in the last couple of years. People come in and, before they were coming in, they were just saying key terms they'd heard, like key brands, we'll say it, Glock. Hey, I want to get a Glock. A Glock to them might not even be an actual Glock pistol. It was a pistol. That was what they knew it as. So now they're coming in, they're saying, hey, what's available? Tell me about this. And it used to be, you had the guys behind the counter that were like one of 3 brands, and they were brand loyals. They were a Glock guy. They were a SIG guy. That was kind of how they did. But now we've got guys that are saying, hey, like, what are you looking for? Okay. Well, what are you looking to spend? Okay. And have you heard of Canik? And let me tell you why, and this, and this. And now you got people that aren't just selling it because it's, the terrible word we hate is cheap, but now it's a good price for a great gun, a superior gun, if you will. And that's where I think we've seen the biggest growth, and we've seen these people that are just starting in the industry or just starting in our community, and their first gun is a Canik. And you know how it is. This industry and this community is contagious. And the energy and the support from other people in this industry is so beautiful, and such a embracing community that it's hard once you get in it to not just dive in completely. You get one gun and then all of a sudden you got 6 and you're like, they're multiplying, and the idea that their first gun and that they're going to be a Canik loyalist out the gate is something that we do not take for granted. And it's been beautiful for us, and we're growing leaps and bounds every day, and it's such a fun ride to be a part of.
Well, we've seen a complete culture shift from behind the counter. Okay, behind the counter, it used to be, like you said, it was you were a SIG guy, you were a Glock guy, you were a Springfield guy. Now you have the people who are educated, and I think that industry wide, we have been very good at now educating the guys behind the counter to go, hey, there's more options. There's options out there, and that they can start pushing the Canik. Because when I started behind the counter, it was, I'm going to date myself, it was like 2013, and Canik was kind of the new kid on the block right around then.
Yeah, it just really hit in 2012. So
yeah. And it was kind of like, you guys really need to look at this thing. And the reliability was there, the price point was there, it hit everything out of the box. And the misnomer or the pushing on Turkish-made guns have changed. It was like Turkey was the place you got cheap shotguns from.
Yeah.
Now it's, hey, they make really well-built, you think, and we were talking about this last night, when you think of Turkey, you think of some guy in a hut with a file, hand filing the gun. And Canik has probably one of the best manufacturing facilities in the world.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I was showing you guys pictures last night. I mean, the level of detail. I mean, ISO 9000 is, a key term we throw around all in terms of like, that is just getting started for them. They have, every cert for every major country in the world in terms of their manufacturing top tier, because they are such a large international player in the firearms space. I mean, we were talking about last night, from 50 cal machine guns to 20 and 30 millimeter cannons to obviously our small arms that we do across the world. They're in over 70 countries in the world right now in terms of LE and military aspects. And the level of accountability, when you start talking at military levels, especially for, NATO countries and first world, like major power players, the level of reliability, dependability, and accuracy in terms of repeatability in your manufacturing processes is something that there is no tolerance for deviation. So Canik has really stepped up and invested a huge amount of their earnings into growing the business from a manufacturing side. And that's where it is. It's now, it's not just this little clone gun or Turkish gun. We are an innovator, and it's obvious in what's coming out now and the brand loyalty.
Well, the coolest story I've heard about Canik is from my friend Nils. And everybody, Nils is friends with you.
Yeah.
Nils was in Turkey making the Rival, and he said he had 5 guns in front of him, and he's like, I like this one, I like this. And like, by the time he was done shooting the 5th gun, he said there was a new prototype sitting on the table.
That was Nils and I. It was Nils and I together. Yeah.
And that's unheard of. That they're taking input, and this is what I appreciate about Canik and you guys, is that you're taking input from the customer base. And I would say Nils is a high-end customer when it comes to things.
He's a little bougie from time to time, yeah. But when you're the fastest man in the world in terms of shooting, you get a little bit of leeway.
I hope Nils doesn't listen to this. You're just going to stroke his ego.
Nils has an attention span of about 30 seconds. Yes. We're like 20 minutes into this thing. He's not.
Great person. If you go watch his stuff.
Nils Jonassen. Yeah. He's actually Canik's team captain. Yeah.
Great guy
in the shooting world.
But for you guys, for Canik to take input from him to build this and take input from the customer, we're seeing that trend start to take off in the industry. I think that, and that's where I think the industry needs to go, is start taking customer input on, backstraps and what to come with. I mean, every little detail when you purchase a Canik is there. Like you said, you've got, the holster, you've got the backstraps, you've got the magazines, you've got everything. Plus, your toolkit's a little Canik, which is the coolest thing.
You want to hear the funny story about this? Yes. So, and I'll say, so first off, it's very important. 10, 15 years ago, in consumerism as a whole, it was the company telling the consumer what they wanted. Mm-hmm. Hey, this is the new cup. It's green. It's got a top. That's what you want. That's what you're going to have. Okay, yeah, and they jammed it down your throat. But now the consumer has become so much more powerful, and it's, hey, we're not going to support this. There's options everywhere. Unless that cup is blue and has this kind of top and is this cost, I'm not going to buy it. And companies either have to evolve or die, So that's a really cool thing that the company industry as a whole hopefully gets to that. And I think Canik kind of was just a step ahead of a lot of companies in doing that. But in terms of the little Canik, so you're right. So the little toolkit is a micro-sized Canik pistol, and it has a little slide on the bottom of the grip, and you can remove all the tools. Utku Aral is the president of Canik, and we were all sitting there one day, and he comes in and he says, "Now this is the CEO, very well put together gentleman. He's young. He's 40 years old. It's his family's business, but he comes in and he looks at us and he says, 'How cool is this?' And he holds it up. And I'm like, 'What is that?' And I think it's like a keychain, And he's like, 'No, this is going to be the new toolkit, and starting with the Mete line.' And he opens it up and he shows and he puts it in the case, and there's a little cutout, and everybody's looking, and he says, 'Adam, what do you think?' I said, 'That is the stupidest thing I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, that will get us destroyed in the U.S. Like, we're not doing that.' And he sits there for a second and he says, 'Okay, thank you for the feedback. We're still doing it.' I said, 'Yes, sir. Great.' So we get into launching the product, and at one of the very first media events I'm at, I'm launching the Mete, and we're going through the features, and I don't even remember who it was. It was somebody big. I think it was like Demolition Ranch or somebody like that. They're like, 'Adam, stop. This is the coolest thing I have ever seen. I was like, I know, right? I thought of it. I thought it was. I told him we had to do this, and so yeah, it's definitely been one of the little extra details that comes in a Canik that really helps kind of show what we're about, and I'm so glad I thought of it.
Yeah, I'm glad too. The coolest piece of Canik swag I have is the USB drive Canik.
Another one, I was like, these are so stupid, and they were like, well, we're doing them. And I was like, dadgummit, and yeah.
So the funny story about that is mine actually got taken away from me.
Oh, at an airport?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've had that happen many times.
Because I didn't even think about it. I'm like, it's just a USB drive. And they're like, sir, there's something in your bag. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's my USB drive. They're like, no.
They're like, no, look, you can drop the mag and everything. They're like, yes, sir.
I'm like, can I at least keep the USB part? They're like, okay. So I lost my cool piece of swag.
I might know a guy to get you another one. Yeah. So.
No, and that's what I like about it. And it as silly as it is, that it's the thing that is most memorable is the cool little swag things or the cool little pieces that are
attention to detail.
Yeah. Yeah. Great idea, by the way.
Even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. So yeah.
So on the Canik side, like we said, you guys are innovative and everything. You talked about your factory. Now let's switch back over to the Century side. Yeah. Pistol braces. The pistol brace thing, the Draco pistols have been just skyrocketing in popularity.
Right.
The brace pistol was one of the coolest things from you.
Including the AP5s, our MP5 clone. I mean, that is the fact that you could get one at a third of the price of anybody else, was something that was huge. But yeah, it's contingent on a lot of it's in terms of the daily use and functionality. You want points of contact that you can use to stabilize.
So how has that impacted you guys? The brace
in terms of sales?
In terms of sales, and
drastically. I think there's a huge disconnect between, like we said, between the government and the common citizen, as they want to kind of refer to us as, just the common people. What they think or what their intention for why they would get rid of braces versus what people actually use them for. Again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in Europe. There is no such thing as an SBR. Mm-hmm. There is no such thing as, regulations on exactly how you can hold or fire your gun. They just want you to be safe. When you do something like this, in my opinion, this is not reflecting of Century, this is not reflecting of Canik, this is simply Adam Ruonala, this was done solely on the purpose of bringing down the sales of guns. They saw that gun prices or gun volumes were increasing with the evolution of the brace. It made different styles of platforms, different options become more appealing to the masses, and in terms of it's just a different experience. It doesn't do anything to make the gun more dangerous, but sometimes I wanted to shoot my 16-inch barrel rifle, and sometimes I wanted to shoot a 10-inch barreled firearm, but I wanted to do it safe and I wanted to do it accurately. And the brace with the stabilizing ability and those extra points of contact helped me do that. But now, because you're saying, this is somehow makes this gun more deadly, what you've actually done by getting rid of the brace is actually make the gun less safe and, in a sense, more deadly, but not in a positive way. Like you've made it more like where I don't feel as comfortable just going out and shooting at 100 yards with my Draco unbraced. It's still a cool gun. It's still fun to have, and it's still great. But there's a lot more controlled environment I could put myself in with a stabilizing brace. So I think this is a strategic move just to bring down gun sales, and they nailed it. That's why it's important to fight this.
Well, you brought up the points of contact, and the AP5 is probably one of the coolest, what we would call now backpack guns.
Yeah,
is a carry, because a lot of states it's a concealed pistol permit.
Mm-hmm.
You can only carry a pistol, and having the ability to have essentially a full-size
platform.
Rifle,
platform
in a small configuration where you could keep in a bag.
In a pistol caliber.
Yeah, in a pistol caliber was great. And now, not having that extra point of contact, that kind of pulls that away from that kind of idea of having that as a quote unquote backpack or truck gun.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's silly. It's silly. What you're doing is people were able to be safer, more controlled, and accurate with this. And now you're saying but it didn't increase the velocity. It didn't make it shoot faster.
Yeah.
It didn't do any of these things that are the narrative of what is dangerous about guns.
Yeah, it's ATF's war on plastic. I mean, we saw it first
Wow,
with the bump stocks, and now we're seeing it with the pistol braces. These are unserialized accessories, and it's a dangerous precedent that they set, and it's something that they were planning for. I mean, making on estimates 40 million Americans felons overnight is an incredible tactic that they had. And just kind of goes countercultural to what gun owners are. I mean, we are the outstanding citizens.
We are the law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, and so by vilifying us, you make us public enemy number one. And that's an important aspect when we dissect issues like this to really understand. Is it was a rogue agency that wants to destroy your natural right. And they've been very, very effective at this, and thankfully we're fighting these in the courts, and we've been able to get a preliminary injunction. But
yeah, so where are we with that? Because actually, you hear so many different kind of things. Can you give us a little insight in terms of, as of now? I don't know what you can and can't say, but as of now, kind of what does it look like? You hear about companies like the FPC having some wins on things like Maxim Defense. What is the actual reality of where we kind of stand as a country and where this actual whole process stands?
Yeah, so I'm not a lawyer, right. And so I want to preference that.
Solid disclaimer.
Our legal team is phenomenal,
right?
And we have a preliminary injunction in our case. We also have submitted amicus briefs on some of the other cases as well, just trying to bolster this, right? Like, this is an important issue. And so we are fortifying the attacks as much as possible.
Right.
Courts take a long time.
Yeah.
This is why being involved in the legislative processes and submitting comments to the ATF and all of those things that sound trivial become so important. And so, GOA members are covered under the preliminary injunction.
And what exactly does that mean, if you don't mind me asking? I know you're not a lawyer. Again, disclaimer again, but yeah.
So on our website, there is a statement, and I highly recommend that everyone read that statement.
Where on the website is it?
You should be able to just search it. I think it's one of the pinned one in our news. And so I'm going to try not to butcher it, but essentially, if you are a GOA member at the time of the ruling, you are covered, and you can own this until it kind of figures out in the court.
That's such a huge
So we
statement of what you guys have done. Wow.
Yeah. So we asked for a nationwide injunction. We didn't just go in and say, hey, like we're fighting for just our members. Like, we're fighting for the Second Amendment as a whole. But the judge was able to issue for our membership. And so we take that and the process continues. The question is, how long does it take? Yeah. And then, is this something which I believe everyone kind of assumes that the Supreme Court is going to be the ultimate decider on this issue?
They're not going to let it go till it gets to that level.
But it's a long process. I mean, there are still bump stock cases working their way through the courts. I mean, this is not it's over in 5 minutes sort of fight.
And the reality of the bump stock one, like you said, is even if it comes back, they killed that brand. They killed that wave. Like, okay, so in a year from now, they say, all right, everything's fine. Sorry about the bump stock thing. Like, you're all good to go again. That wave is past. Yeah. That ship has sailed. Yeah, so some people have, but they put a lot of companies out of business. They put a lot of people out of jobs. And they, like you said, made a lot of people felons that weren't overnight. And there's no coming back from that. And that's the intention.
Well, do you remember, I think it was 2021, when there was a call between the industry and ATF about pistol braces, and they go, how much business is going to impact if we do the ruling? And they figured it was like $1 billion part of the industry.
I think it's more than that, but I remember I was on that call.
Yeah. You remember, and there's so many. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I know of manufacturers who have boxes and boxes of braces sitting in their facility that they can't do anything with until this gets figured out. And that's, for a larger manufacturer, it's a write-off, it's destroyable,
But it's not.
But it's not.
It's not even for, like you said, a larger man, even if you're talking a Sig Sauer or something like this, the reality is it's not a write-off, because not only do you have these boxes and boxes of them, but then you have pistol configuration platforms that now are not nearly as desirable without that, which means they're shutting down lines or they're transitioning, and that's people without a job. I mean, and you're talking right now with inflation being the way it is, and the market and people worried, and the brace rules, then you're seeing people lose their jobs in our industry every single day by like 10%, 15% of entire companies being kind of downsized. And it's not because we're, greedy trying to protect the bottom line. It's like simply the business isn't there. And it's an intentional strike, like you said. And they're like, all right, we can't go after the serialized item. So what can we do? And they found something, and that's why they attack mag capacity. That's why they attack things like that. I mean, it's asinine, but it's an effective approach they're doing. It's the same thing, like you said, with the 1,000% tax, and then saying, all right, we'll get a 20% tax eventually then, and it won't seem that big of a deal. But they're finding ways around to ultimately, it'd be like, oh, we don't want people driving cars anymore, so we're going to make it hard to get tires. Without the tire, you can have the car, but it's not going to run.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing.
Well, you talked about it. It took, so the micro compact took 2 years of development. You've had it for 2 years. It takes development. You're developing, probably at the time before this, you were probably developing or looking at a couple different options to import that money into the development, and now you have to pivot the entire design of that. I mean, what is the impact on a manufacturer on that side when you have to pivot an entire line from going, okay, we're going to bring this cool thing to market, and now I have to pivot to make it not as cool.
Just to fit in the box.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, anytime there's money spent that you're not going to see a return on, ultimately is going to be a ripple effect on the business. And unfortunately, a lot of times where that comes into play, because, I was talking to the guy from Forge Relations. Obviously we're here and they're doing a great job of hosting us. But I was talking to Will, and he said, when we get more business is when we can hire more people. And when we can hire more people, we can do more of a scope of work. But the reality is, a lot of these companies, even, some of the really big ones, they still work hand to mouth. So when there's more business, there's more employees. When there's less business, there has to be less employees. And some of the really cool companies that we're all big fans of are much more direct than that. They are literally, we got a contract for 100 guns. All right, we need 3 guys to help us build these. They're very boutique, very, very intricate. And if the business changes and the business model changes and suddenly their niche isn't desired anymore, they're out of business. Literally out of business. And it ruins not only the owner's life, but then all the people that they help support.
Yeah, talking about impact of the industry and jobs lost, but also points in which people can even purchase firearms, is the ATF's new zero tolerance policy.
Yeah.
What is the effect on that for someone like Canik and Century, when you're seeing drop-offs substantially in the amount of people who are even opening up gun stores and ranges, and then those that are going out of business?
Yeah. So, obviously there's a huge online presence now, but even with that, you still have to have the checks and balances. But in my opinion, I think in the firearm space, more than most spaces in this world today, brick and mortar, having a building, having that place to go in to pick it up, have the fit and feel of the firearm. Talk to somebody. Like you said, now that the dynamic of who is on the other side of that counter has changed. And these people are not only educated and passionate, but they understand the power of what they do. And that's why I like to call the guys behind the counter are ambassadors now. And really, in my opinion, they really are. I stopped by the Palmetto State Armory, the store here in town in Myrtle Beach that they just opened a couple days ago or a couple months ago. And I was talking to the guys. They didn't know who I was. I was walking around just kind of listening to what they were saying. And these guys, like the passion that they were talking to people now was so powerful. And it wasn't, it used to be if you went in and said, hey, so what kind of clip does this take? Oh, you were ruined. You know what I mean? But now it's, well, actually, sir, so this takes a 9mm, and we refer to it as a magazine. And if you want, I can explain the difference between a clip and a mag, blah, 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 blah. This is the proper way to hold it. Would you like? We have one on the range right now. We can go over there and we can put 5 rounds through it. The attention to detail, the attention to nurturing the consumer, because there are so many new gun owners. And I think it's gone as the good old days, or the good old boy system of you're an idiot if you don't know as much as I do, to now people realizing how important it is to build and grow our community with these 9 million new members and continuing to grow, that if they're going to continuously make it harder and harder. Listen, I am a staunch believer, again, this is just Adam talking, that there should be a level of compliance, not compliance in terms of yes, master, I'll do what you say, but in terms of these are the guidelines and regulations you need to follow to be a safe and proper FFL. That's just the way it is, because sloppy gun ownership, sloppy FFL ownership is a danger to our country, is a danger to our community, and we all need to hold each other accountable for doing things the right way. But to say, all right, it goes from how it has worked for so long, and common sense, all right, have a proper ledger of what you have in the store, make sure you are selling to the right people, these kind of basic things, to so staunchly ridiculous that it literally makes it either impossible for a new company to come into existence or nearly impossible to stay in business. Is, like you said, it's another strategic play to slowly downsize what we do as a community. And for us, understanding as Canik and Century the importance of brick and mortar, it's a very scary thing, because you're losing that community. You're losing that point of contact. Not everybody wants to go onto Reddit and find out what their best gun for them is. And even if they read 50 different things on it, it's not going to actually be accurate. They need to go in, be able to feel it, be able to understand, and have somebody like you, John, talk across the counter about why this is important and why, all right, these are the 4 things your pinky's shorter than most people's, and this is why it's going to be important to have, a pinky rest on your gun. Or, hey, listen, you're left-handed, so yeah, this gun is ambidextrous, and it's going to be really important for that. But in a situation where you can't use your left hand, this is what you should do with your right hand to be able to understand this. Those things are important, and if you don't have somebody sitting in front of you, a lot of people can't learn like that, and I think that's intentional to kind of shrink the size of the community.
Yeah, that's one of our current lawsuits that we're working on, is the zero tolerance policy, because it's very important that we not only have more gun stores and ranges, but even more importantly are the ranges and where people can go and have that diversity of training. And I think that there's this idea that the anti-gun left has that says, these people are armed and dangerous just because you purchase a firearm. And it's like, no, I think everyone who understands that you're responsible for every action of your firearm. And so you get training, and then you go back and you get more training, and generally it becomes a passion, and then you want to learn under this person and that person, and you're watching and you're taking in content, on YouTube or on Rumble or whatever platform is your preference. But generally you start consuming it more, and you find, new techniques and things that you really push for.
Yeah. Well, we really went from and again, I applaud the guys behind the counter, but we went from the, hey, it shoots 9mm, you should buy this, to, hey, here's the features, here's the advantage, here's the benefit of those features. And that's where we've shifted, because it wasn't like that. It was, if you and I are about, you're a little older than I am, but it was.
Relax.
Relax. I'll relax. But it used to be you'd go to the gun store, and there'd be like 4 guys hanging out in the corner around the coffee pot, and they live there, and we're changing the little bit of that feel from, there's still that group of people who live there by the coffee pot and are always there talking and stuff like that. But now they're more approachable, they're more easier to talk to, and we're seeing a shift where if you want the good old boy society, it's in the forums on Facebook and stuff. And if you want the experience, the gun store, the brick and mortar experience has really leaps and bounds over than what it used to be.
Yeah.
The happiest day of my life. No, I'm not kidding. Just kidding there. No, but one of the happiest or the proudest moments for me as like a gun owner is when I walked into the store and wasn't immediately shown a pink, purple, or blue gun. I was like, oh, wow, this is nice. Like, because when I started out as a gun owner,
I'd already bought it.
When I started out as a gun owner, if you were a female, like you were
the muddy
shown.
Girl. Here's your muddy girl gun. Yeah, you remember those, and that was like the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was your option. That was like you could be like, oh, can I see that? And then they would show it to you. I mean, they wanted ultimately the sell, but like women were very pigeonholed into like you must want a glittery.
What do you mean? You don't
really
want like
bright.
A leopard print J-frame?
Well, first off, I don't know if you guys remember when we did the Miami Days and the Miami Nights Canics, and that was the fastest selling gun we've ever had in the history of canning. There was 6,100 of those guns made, 3,050 of the white and 3,050 of the black, the Miami Days and Miami Nights. We sold all 6,100 of them in like 2 hours.
Wow.
Gone.
They looked amazing.
Yeah.
I remember when we were making that, I was like, oh God, here we go. This is going to go one of 2 ways, and luckily it went away that we wanted it to. But yeah, but you're right. And I think that's important because, like you said, females were so, oh, okay, we'll get you a gun, little lady, but this is what it's going to be. To now it's, all right, you're a part of the community.
Yeah.
But I also think it's now the reason, in my opinion, that like the Miami Days and Miami Nights were so successful is no longer is the community just like, and don't get me wrong, I love them, but no longer is the community just the 1911 FUD with, this is 1-2 world wars and this is how it is and it's got to have wood grips and it's got to be this and it's got to be a GI and that's it. It's about having personality and it's okay. If you want, you know what? I think one of the coolest things is when somebody pulls out a flashy gun on the range. It's not like flashy all comped out, but like something like a Miami Days. And then they're hitting steel at 100 yards with a 9mm pistol, and you're like, that's pretty badass. Like you're like, that's really cool. It's okay. The community's big enough now. It's strong enough now. We're informed enough now that we're allowed to have personality. It's okay to put rims on your car. It's okay to have a system in your car, even if you're a 40-year-old man, but because it's about enjoying your passions, and the firearms community and shooting is a passion. Yeah. It's an inalienable right, but it's also fun, man. It's so much fun, and it's such a community. And I think we are finally getting to that point where people can actually embrace it as a proud hobby, as a proud lifestyle. There's a reason that podcasts like this are trending and becoming popular, because people actually, outside of just that 65-year-old 1911 45 guy win 2 world wars, it could be the guy that has his first gun was, he is from Miami, but now he lives in Virginia, and he saw it, and wow, that's cool, and he bought it. Now he's on the range shooting it, and he's actually talking to the 65-year-old next to him that has and he's shooting a 1911 for the first time. And, that's what it's about. It's about all the diversity. I mean, we know the 2 biggest categories that are growing in our industry right now in terms of buyer, what they are, females and minorities. And for so long, everybody in a gun store was what? A 55-year-old white man. Call a spade a spade. And it's so beautiful to see the community, the 2A community, actually being more reflective of what the American society is, which is a melting pot. And as the more we can grow the 2A community to be a true reflection of American society and the American community, the harder it's going to be for the politicians to divide us. Because we know what they use to divide us in this country. They use fear tactics with things like disease. They use religion, and they use racism and sexism and bundle it all into this ball called politics. And that's what they'll do to divide the 2A community from the rest of the U.S. community. But if the 2A community is the melting pot that is our country as a whole, good luck.
Yeah.
Good frickin' luck.
No, I think that's absolutely right.
What is, now that we kind of covered all that, what new is coming from you guys? Like, you guys have been innovative, cool stuff, the Rival S. I mean, I want everything that you have. And I just need to find the funds. So
the whole desire of the product is the easy part. It's the whole paying for it that's the difficult part. Yeah, there's been times where I've literally had negative paychecks. So I get it. So yeah, so there's some really, really cool stuff in the works. A lot of it's going to be debuting end of this year, or there's always this big event first month of the year in Vegas, where we all end up around some circle, little structure, and have too many libations, and then talk about guns during the day, SHOT Show. So we'll definitely debut with more detail there. But I don't know, I'll give you a couple tidbits. So for instance, on the Century side, we're working very diligently right now to bring back some highly demanded products of the past, to include maybe some different versions of roller delay blowback firearms in different calibers, specifically 308 and 5.56. There's some opportunities to do that. We're working on some projects in that same scope. As we were talking, the AP5 is something that was received in huge fanfare over the last couple of years, and we worked very, very hard with our MKE facility in Turkey to bring in as many of those as we could at a price that the average American could afford. And that kind of changed in terms of the demand for that, but also the feasibility of it with this brace ban. So we said, well, what's the issue? They said, 16-inch barrel. Okay, so if it's a 16-inch barrel, it can be a rifle. A little more difficult, as we talked about what it means for 922R compliance, things like that. But let's just say working on solving that solution. And hopefully that stays as a very powerful SKU for us in the future once GOA helps knock down that brace ban. But that's something right now that we want to be able to still provide the American citizen with an option that they don't have to jump through 20 hoops to own and shoot it in a way that they're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. So we're working on perhaps a rifle configuration of some sort there. On the Canik side, we have some really, really cool partnerships coming out and some iterations of some existing. So the MC9, obviously our micro compact carry gun, has just come out gangbusters. I mean, we can't make enough, and that's a good problem to have. But we know, for so long, it was a race to make the smallest gun possible. And that's kind of where we all got with that MC9, with that Hellcat, with that Springfield. But then, now we found that thin gun with the capacity. Now people are like, all right, but I want it to be not only my everyday carry, but something that's very, very comfortable. And I know kind of that middle ground of where that could be. So we're going to be coming out with some iterations of the MC9 that are a little more friendly for different sizes and preferences of people. So there will be 3 iterations of that'll be coming out that'll add a little more customization in terms of what you're looking for. Maybe a higher capacity, maybe a little longer slide, maybe in barrel, but still with that thin, profile that allows for the concealability and the lack of printing when you're carrying. So we're going to have some really cool options of that. And then, and I have to be very careful how I word this one, but judging him, he's already told the world. So we have officially inked and are working on a very big project. It's been a war to get it done. But we've been in combat for quite some time for this. We're going to be releasing a very special project with Taryn Butler and the TTI crew. So that...
Would you say you've mastered it?
It's son of a gun. So we are very excited about that. It's in its final stages. I'm actually going to meet with those guys in a couple weeks. And it's just going to be a very exciting project, and it's going to be the first of its kind that this industry's ever seen in terms of offerings versus cost. So we're really excited about that. This podcast is the very first time I've ever actually spoken publicly on it. So, it's very exciting. We kind of did Taryn said hello at the booth at NRA and was, waving around, but we didn't really explain why. But yeah, so here we go.
Yeah, it was, I'm really excited for you guys about that. We've talked about it in depth between the two of us, and I think you guys are going to kill that. It's going to be knocked out of the park. Now, what I need you guys to do is come up with a name for that longer grip micro compact, because there's not a name for it, because it's not a micro compact. I've been arguing with this with people. Yeah. It's not a micro compact. There needs to be a name, because it's not a compact. It's not a micro compact. What is it? There's no
Well, we have a name.
You have a name.
We do.
Okay.
But it's interesting because when we went out to get the trademark the term MC9, there is actually, we were surprised there is a couple other MC things and stuff. But remember when, and the reason I speak so candidly, a lot of rule marketing 101 is you don't mention other brands' names.
Right.
But I don't mind for things like SIG and Springfield. What they did for the industry with those EDCs in terms of the micro compact category was revolutionary, especially SIG with that, the P365. It was a very big deal, and it was a very good gun that they created. But they didn't even know what they were starting. They didn't even know what they didn't know, and that's why Canik has had the opportunity to grow, because that we built off of we said, wow, they're doing something really good, but what does it need? It needs to be able to be optics ready out the gate with the base model. It needs to be able to co-witness. It needs to have a higher capacity. It needs of this. It needs of that. We were able to build off of that because they kind of started that game. When they started that game and then the Hellcat came out, there was no such thing as a micro compact category. So that became a name. It became a category after. You know what I mean? Right. And then that's why we were able to get MC9, because they didn't even think to trademark that. What is an MC? And I would love to know who kind of really pinned that term. But that's what we're looking to do with Canik, is now be the forefront that then we're behind the 8 ball in terms of our marketing later, because we created something we didn't even know how special it was going to be. And then others follow us. And that's in my opinion, while we all want to be the biggest and the baddest and the best, without each other, we're in trouble. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's where we are. As an industry, we need 6 Hour, we need Springfield, we need Glock, we need Canik, we need Ruger, we need Walther. We need them all, because the more power we have in numbers, just as you said, we need the members of GOA to speak up. We need the people that aren't members yet to speak up, because power is in numbers, and innovation comes with challenge. The old term, a rising tide lifts all ships. So when one of us as an industry leader, a company, comes out with something new and the community embraces it, what that does is it makes all the others say, all right, we got to get on board. And then what it does is it ultimately creates better product, which keeps our gun community as a whole safer and more responsible. And ultimately, and I say this term very, very strategically, there's nothing wrong with the term deadly. When I need to be, I will be. But also with that comes responsibility. So I want to create a product that gives somebody the most accurate chance of accomplishing the task that they need to do, whether it's teach their son how to hit a target at 10 yards, whether it's hit a target at 100 yards, or ultimately defend themselves and the people they care about with lethal force if they absolutely have to, and ultimately neutralize the threat and only the threat. And that's and we can beat around the bush as much as we want, but the reality is that a firearm is a great equalizer. And we know a lot of times the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is
a good guy with a gun.
And you know what? You want them to have the best damn product they can possibly have that fits them to the best of their needs, that allows them to have, the element of surprise by concealed carry if they want, allows them to have the most accurate shot possible with a stabilizing brace in an AP5, that allows them to train and be able to afford to train, and that allows them not to be vilified if they have something like a piece of plastic that suddenly is now making them a felon. We want them to have all of the tools necessary to be the best they can be when they need to be it in whatever situation that may be. And that's kind of where we are as a company. And that's why we support people like the GOA, because you guys are fighting on the other side for us so that we can continue our rights. Yes. Do we want to make money? Yes. Do we want to grow our business? Yes. Do we want to employ more people? Yes. But ultimately what we want to do is protect our Second Amendment rights. And that's why we're here today. And that's why we're going to continue to support you guys.
No, I really appreciate that. Now, a real quick follow-up question. What trends? No, because we asked a few other people this. What trends do you see coming out of the industry? I know that we talked about how you guys are listening to the consumer and that. What's the next big trend that we're going to see?
Oh, what is your crystal ball, right? So I really do believe that our industry is cyclical in terms of like kind of the things, I think there's going to be, right now there's the conversations of caliber. What is the best caliber? And for a long time, you remember it was 45. Then it was 9. Then it was 40 cal. Then 40 cal was the thing. And then it went back to 9. And then there's now right now we need a 10 millimeter. Everybody wants a 10 millimeter. The 5.7, in my opinion, I think the biggest thing right now with ammo being, we're seeing the ups and downs of what ammo is over the last couple of years. I think it's going to be the ability to consistently train. I think as more people get into the industry or into the community, I think you're going to see scarcities of ammo and things like that. So it's going to be products that are readily accessible to do training, because ultimately sometimes you're going to price yourself out in terms of, what's available. So I think the 22 wave is coming back strong. I mean, you're seeing it with certain guns out there right now. Canik's working on some stuff like that, I don't mind saying. I think that'll be big. I think, on the rifle side, I wish I knew. I really don't, because, for so long it was the, pistol brace configurations. Where do we go now? We're working on some things, and we're going to try a bunch of different things and kind of bring them out and see what the community embraces, because ultimately it's going to be on the feedback of them. And sometimes we don't even know what we want. Kind of like when I was talking about the MC9, micro compact. We didn't know what the micro compact was until we said, hey, this is a micro compact. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where that comes.
All right, I'm going to throw 3 out to you I've seen. Okay. 1, bolt guns.
Yeah. 2,
lever guns, and 3, polymer switching over to steel.
Okay, so I can answer on all 3 of those. So bolt guns, I think bolt guns have been out there for a little while, and I think you're seeing a resurgence of passion for them, and more specifically, the intricacies of like customizing one. I, for instance, am working on that, and Century maybe working on something really cool for that. That's a little farther, and I would absolutely get mortified if I brought up that anymore. But yeah, there's some really cool stuff there. But I think with that, it's going to be a hybrid of, hunting bolt guns have been around forever. My 700 that I've had since I was, in my 20s, and then, put a Timothy trigger in it, smoothed out the bolt, did all the kind of things that, as I had a little money, made it more of a customizable, as opposed to just, it was a stock Remington 700 that I put on, but then I put, the Magpul chassis on it. Now I made it kind of cool. Well, now there's opportunities out there with some of the like lightweight, aluminum chassis and things like that, and the spring fed, the spring assisted bolts and the triggers and all that come out that are very cool with that. So it's a tactical / precision / hunting rifle all in one. I think those are very cool. The lever action guns are they've been badass for a while. But the reality is the market's still very unique for that. Like, I want one. I've been trying to get a hold of somebody at Henry for a while to get a discount, because 2 things. 1, discount because those things are expensive. And 2, you just can't find them, And then like the Marlin, the 4570, that thing is just a monster. I want one, but they came out with it and they sold them out.
Because everyone's hunting T-Rex with them.
Yeah, I mean, those T-Rexes are getting out of control.
Oh, right?
Yeah. But so I think they're very cool. I think the lever action, though, I mean, you've got some great companies out there like, I mean, everything from the high end, like you said, like the Henrys and then the Marlin and all, to like the more price point, like the Rossies and stuff like that, like that are very cool brands. But I think it's kind of like, how far do you want to go from what it is? It's a cowboy lever action gun. Some people are turning them kind of tactical, with like the skeletonized chassis and like the side saddle bullets, and they're cool. But what else do you do to that innovate it? There's a reason they went away from that. It innovated, but from a homage to like where we came from, where we've been, I think it's very cool. The interesting one is what you said with the transition from polymer to steel. That's a really interesting one. So, for instance, when we first decided we were going to do the Rival S, the steel frame pistol, the Rival was our polymer striker-fired pistol. In 2022 at SHOT Show, we released it, and we won Handgun of the Year with it. And then we said, all right, we're going to do a steel frame gun. We're going to do the same gun pretty much, but in steel. My first question was, okay, but why? Okay, but why? Then I shot it. Then I knew why. I mean, it's like I said, cyclical. We went from steel is steel and, cold, hard steel to, it's got to be the lightest possible gun ever, to then, wow, we made it so light, it's so snappy in your hand, to, all right, we'll add a little weight. We'll put a weighted backstrap on it, to we'll put a little weight on the front pick rail, to we'll add weight to the base pad, to, well, why don't we just make the gun weigh more again? And so now you've kind of come back to it, and the lack of muzzle rise on our Rival S, and you shoot that, and it's 0.9 pounds heavier than the polymer version of the Rival. And then we distributed the weight from the back of the trigger guard all the way forward through the front of the barrel. And the noticeable difference is astronomical. So I think if I was going to pick one of those three that I think you're going to continue to see more evolutions in, I think it'd be having steel framed options. Would I want to everyday carry a Rival S? Absolutely not. I feel like I'd pull my pants down, but as a whole, I think that's an avenue that we could go back to exploring, taking today's innovation and modernization and combining it with, what is the core of our foundation, which is steel. Buildings, planes, cars, everything goes back to steel. I think that'd be the coolest way to see kind of what we can, the days of old combined with the days of new, and make something really cool.
Well, and that's what, just looking at the rest of the industry, we're seeing that kind of trend happen where they're going to steel. There's two more, but you're probably going to go, we're not going to do that. The other two is the 2011s are getting real hot, and then the hammer-fired stuff is starting to creep.
Hammer-fired,
it's
to me, okay, like, I love a good revolver.
Yeah.
Okay, but to me, that's it. Like, and I'm not knocking it, and Uku in Turkey might be about to send a Scud missile over here for me to, but to me, okay, it is what it is. I don't think they're bad. I have some, not me. I mean, on the other side though, the 2011, they're getting big, but what they're getting big for is these super bougie, Staccato and guys like that. They're awesome guns, but can everybody afford a $4,000 gun? And honestly, to be don't get me wrong, if I could afford one, I would have one. So I'm not knocking that by any means. I think they're awesome. But if it's just a very raw platform, if somebody could come out with one that was kind of entry level in cost, but had, say, 50% of the features and viability that like a Staccato does, I think you could have some really cool success with it. But to have it at $33,000, and it's worth that because of what the work that's put into it, but it just becomes a lot less approachable for people.
So you heard it here first. We're trying to get Adam to do. No, just kidding. Adam will never come and talk to us.
I don't know. Here's this. I don't mind saying these are all conversations that we have internally every day, and we're constantly working with partners. One of the things that Century does the strongest is work with industry leaders outside of just our company to help import different products.
Yeah. Well, I think from the consumer side of things, we're thankful for that, right? We want to see the innovation, but we also want to see, how we can can grow our collection, because ultimately, I jokingly tell people all the time, gun owners are just hoarders that haven't been diagnosed. Because I mean, we just have.
I feel personally attacked.
I mean, I'm right there in the middle of it, but I mean, because we want to train with different things. We want to be able to introduce people into shooting, and so you have to have different options that are going to fit the difference. My husband is 6'3", I'm 5 foot. We don't shoot the same gun comfortably. And so you gotta have a little wiggle room. Have
diversity in your portfolio. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I agree. I have one idea I'm going to toss to you. You have the MC. Can you please come out with a MC Hammer style MC? Talk to him. Talk to his people.
And on that note, thanks for coming to Gun Owner America's podcast. Yeah. So, one of the things we're not afraid to do is push the envelope. So who knows what will be out there in the future? Like we said, obviously with the Miami Days and Miami Nights and some of the other fun stuff we've done, there's allowed to be humor in this industry. So what makes life beautiful is you're allowed to laugh, you're allowed to have fun, and as long as you still remember the core fundamentals of keeping yourself safe and keeping others around you safe with a gun, it's okay to laugh. And so you know what? Maybe we'll do one with like our Canik Creations, which is the custom Cerakote line with the imaging. Maybe we'll do you an MC Hammer gun.
So Adam, while we wrap this up, where can people find Canik, Century, and yourself?
Yeah. Myself, we don't know. I mean, my personal is Adam is tiny. So the irony of that is, I'm slightly larger than the average bear, and probably an actual bear. But on a professional side, we are obviously prevalent on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We have Century Arms. It's not all the other little bells and whistles and all the weird spin-offs but actually just at Century Arms. On the Canik side, we have at Canik USA and at Canik. Both of those are actual official pages. And then we have a Century Arms and a Canik YouTube, as well as centuryarms.com and canikusa.com are going to be the proper starting points for any information you're looking on our products or kind of what we're doing, or partnerships with companies like GOA, organizations like GOA. So we're very much there. We're very interactive, and any input you have what we could do better, what we could do next, we are very active on those. We have people monitoring daily. And I just wanted to say to you guys, it's such a pleasure to sit here with you. It's such a pleasure to sit with people that are forethinkers in our industry. Some of the people that you guys surround yourself with are genuinely revolutionary in this community, and I just want to thank you guys. I want to let you know that we are here to support you any way we possibly can. Just know what we're going to go ahead and say is I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a Rival S, which is a very, very tough one to find right now. And what I would like you guys to do with it in your time, at your speed, figure out a way to get it to one of your members or somebody that's listening to this podcast, so that they can know how appreciative we are of them taking the time to listen, and kind of just spur them on to, as you said, be a voice in our community.
Wow, thank you for that. We are so blessed, and I know that's going to be such a blessing to one of our members.
Absolutely.
On that note, we want to thank Adam again for joining us. Appreciate it again, brother. This was a great conversation. We've been at it for a while. Again, go ahead, go to gunowners.org, sign up, become a member, and we appreciate you listening. Have a great rest of your day.